Chapter 11, Psychological Counseling. A few minutes later, Yan Hong ran back with a contract and a spiritual pen. The lowest grade of contract paper was 5 spirit stones each, and the lowest grade of spiritual pen was 1 spirit stone each. All of their funds had been used up now. Yan Hong rested on the dining table while writing furiously. Very soon, a proof of allegiance was formed. Proof of allegiance, establishing brotherhood, trusting each other in life and death, helping each other in good times and bad, depending on each other be it fortune or calamity, and supporting each other in times of difficulties. Of course, these were all beautiful nonsense, because in the contract, these requirements were clearly stated as single items. Jiang Li and Yan Hong signed their names at the top, and then went back to let the others sign their names as well. Other than not deliberately sending them to their deaths, Yan Hong had requested that the people who submitted to him serve them unconditionally for 18 months. Although this was also exploitation and oppression, it was undoubtedly much better than 2 years of forced labor. First of all, the time was shortened by half a year. Even if Yan Hong really took away all their monthly allowance, they could still cultivate. No matter what, it was better than wasting 2 years of time. Yes, there's nothing wrong with the contract. However, if we have to choose, there are good and bad aptitudes even among the low-grade spiritual roots. I still remember a few names. We can choose them first. Even if 2 people had the same low-grade spiritual root, the more they filled the spirit testing bead, the better their natural talent would be. Since they wanted to choose, they had to pick the better ones. I know, wait for my good news. Yan Hong then ran out after saying that. This time, he went out for a longer period of time. While waiting, Jiang Li also found a table to sit at. Soon, many of the soon-to-be disciples who were indecisive surrounded him and began to enthusiastically chat. Especially when Yan Fengyu and a few pretty girls surrounded him and kept calling him Brother Jiang. It made him feel comfortable. Clearly, these people were not going to submit but only wanted some support. But at this time, it was good to raise their prestige. Several more teams were brought in, and the spacious lounge soon became more lively. In particular, there was a group of young men and women who were obviously older than them, who were wearing simple clothing that had gone through wear and tear. This should be the group of children who were forced to work 2 years ago. Like a flock of quails, they huddled in the corner of the lounge. They did not dare to speak loudly or eat more food. The curiosity and liveliness in their eyes were gone. There were clearly more than 1,000 people, but it was surprisingly quiet. It was a stark contrast to the situation where the people were forming their own groups. This was a group of people who had been beaten by society and had their edges worn down by the cruel world. Even if they were to become a member of the cultivation world in the future, they would still be a group of people working hard at the bottom. Come to think of it, in his previous life, he was just such a person. Where there were people, there would be class. Where there was class, there would be exploitation. Such things would never change no matter where they went. There was only one way to escape the fate of being exploited, and that was to exploit others. Yan Hong's plan was a brutal capital accumulation, the first step to achieving class advancement. Of course, in this world with immortals, devils, gods, and ghosts, everything depended on strength. Without enough strength to protect it, no matter how many spirit stones one earned, they would still be as defenseless as rootless duckweed. After some time, when Fu Zhang appeared again and everyone set off again, Yan Hong finally arrived. Behind him were 19 soon-to-be disciples who seemed to have survived a calamity. Among them were 10 males and 9 females. "This is my brother Jiang Li. Hurry up and greet him." "Big brother Jiang Li." Yan Hong reprimanded them sternly. 19 youths bowed to Jiang Li at the same time. They bent over 90 degrees and did not dare to straighten their backs before getting a response. Jiang Li looked at Yan Hong in surprise. He did not expect this fatty to have such an ability. Could it be that he was also a transmigrator? Did he study human resource management in his previous life? Yan Hong raised his eyebrows and whispered a few words into Jiang Li's ear, before handing the contract to him for safekeeping. It turned out that this guy came back so late because he wanted to strike while the iron was hot and give these 19 people psychological counseling, brainwashing. From the way he was behaving, the psychological counseling was really effective. "All right, get up." Only when Jiang Li spoke did they dare to stand up straight. However, they still lowered their heads, not daring to look straight at Jiang Li and Yan Hong. "Come aboard with us first." The venue of the Immortal Ascension Assembly was not in the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. With the Immortal Ascension Pavilion as the center, a rich mortal city had been established. Most cultivators did not like the clamor of the mortal world, so every year, the venue of the Immortal Ascension Assembly was set on an island in the middle of a lake behind the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. Except, "Jiang Li, are you sure this thing is a ship and that place ahead is a lake?" Yan Hong pulled Jiang Li along and asked softly. After all, he had his underlings behind him. As a leader, he could not reveal his ignorance. "Cough, cough, what's the big deal? It's just a little bigger than normal." Jiang Li looked at the flying ship that was at least 20 meters tall and the lake that was surging with waves. He calmly boarded the ship. He had already sensed that this world seemed to be much larger than Earth in his previous life. It was as if everything had been enlarged. It was reasonable for a lake to have an island, right? With over 2,000 people present, it was reasonable for a ship to fit all of them in, right? According to the information Yan Hong obtained from Fu Zhang, the voyage would only last for a day, and they would reach the island in the middle of the lake by tomorrow. Jiang Li had observed that although this ship was huge, it seemed to have used some special technique. The speed of sailing was actually not slow at all. Even then, they still had to sail for a day and night. This lake was indeed shockingly huge. Due to Yan Hong having a high-grade spiritual root, they successfully obtained a large and comfortable room to stay in. Jiang Li gathered all 19 of his subordinates. After Yan Hong's session, he started to counsel them again. "Don't worry, Yan Hong and I are not bad people. Don't worry too much in the future. Work hard with us. Look at all of you and then look at us. We are a young and vigorous group, and we will only get better and better in the future. As long as you listen to our command and are willing to suffer, when the organization becomes big and strong, you will be the first batch of contributors to the organization. We will definitely not treat you badly. I'm strict with you now, and I want you to work hard. This isn't for us but for all of you. It's for us to seek immortality together. Tell me, do all of you want to become immortals?" "We do." "Do you want to live forever?" "We do." "Good, all of you are great. I don't care about talent or ability. I only care about attitude." "Tell me your attitude." "We will work hard, we will work hard." "Let me see your determination." "Fight, fight, fight." When they went out later on, all 19 of their faces were red and swollen. However, no one knew why they were all smiling and looking forward to the future. Chapter 12. A sword may rust but not the heart. The huge ship sailed on the waves, but Jiang Li, who was in the cabin, almost did not feel any shaking or vibrations. In these few days, he also stopped cultivating the aged tiger technique and took an actual nap instead. A day later, the hull shook slightly as the ship slowly approached the shore. Waves of cries could be heard from the deck as Jiang Li and Yan Hong walked out of the cabin in response. What entered their sight was an island enshrouded in dense fog. In the morning sunlight, two strange peaks connected heaven and earth. From afar, one could almost see a few immortal cranes flying through the clouds. The eyes of the soon-to-be cultivators lit up when they saw this. After the gangway was lowered, everyone disembarked impatiently and walked along a cobblestone path towards the venue. "How is it? Did you find out anything?" Jiang Li finally realized that Yan Hong had a special passion and talent in the ways of human affairs. While he was lying on the bed, Yan Hong had already brought the 19 subordinates to gather intelligence. Next was the important moment to choose their cultivation sect. If nothing unexpected happened, Jiang Li would be living in that sect for a very long time to come. Joining a sect was not like looking for a job. It was not something that you could quit as you wished. In order to have better prospects and development in the future, it was natural to assess many aspects. The first thing to consider was the size and future potential of the sect. Secondly, to consider the monthly treatment given to the disciples by the sect and whether it was of a higher standard. No matter how good a sect was, it would be useless without this. The third point was the advancement and growth of the individual in this sect. If a sect was completely controlled by certain families and other forces, then no matter how outstanding an ordinary disciple's performance was, they would not have much of a future. These 3 points were more important. There were also things like the comprehensive strength, area of expertise, geographical position, sect culture, main cultivation methods, attributes, and so on that had to be taken into consideration. Of course, the Immortal Ascension Pavilion would not give you this information. Their goal was to get more disciples to join the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. Naturally, they would not help promote their competitors. However, this was not completely out of the question. The 1,000+ soon-to-be disciples who had suffered 2 years of labor were their source of information. They were not given cultivation methods to officially cultivate, so they were still a group of mortals. However, they had lived in the cultivation world as servants for 2 years, so they were naturally aware of this basic information. This was especially true for the Immortal Ascension Pavilion, which was a service industry. From the pavilion masters to the servants, they had to be extremely familiar with the names of powerful sects and powerful cultivators that they could not afford to offend. Thus, after Yan Hong's hard work, a small booklet that introduced the sects of the Great Mountain region soon arrived in Jiang Li's hands. There are a total of 52 sects participating in the Immortal Ascension Assembly. There are 4 sects that are recommended among them. They are the strongest in the region of the Great Mountain. It is also the choice of the majority of the disciples at each meeting. However, some reliable small and medium-sized sects, in order to recruit more new disciples, often provide better treatment to help with cultivation. Perhaps in some small sects, with our qualifications, we can directly enter the inner sect after entering. It might even be possible for us to become core disciples and be fully nurtured. Come take a look and give me some advice. Yan Hong flipped through another similar booklet with a conflicted expression on his face. He looked like a straight-A student who had gotten the top scorer in the exams and was currently wondering if it was better to go to Tsinghua University or Peking University. Jiang Li was somewhat speechless. However, with the other party's high-grade spiritual root aptitude, he believed that no sect would reject him. First of all, we must not choose those unorthodox sects. If we end up receiving incomplete cultivation methods from them, we will have nowhere to cry and regret our choice. He flipped through it again and realized that the sect on the first page seemed to have been marked a lot. This Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak looks pretty good. There aren't many disciples, but the sect is the strongest of the 4. It has an inheritance from the ancient Shu Mountain Sword sect. Every disciple that joins can obtain a life-bound flying sword given by the sect. This treatment is much better than the other sects. Jiang Li pointed at the first name on the booklet. That's right, that's right. The Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak is said to be the undisputed leader of the orthodox path in the Great Mountain. However, their requirements for recruiting disciples are also very special. Not only does the grade of the spiritual root need to be above medium grade, but it also requires a special talent called Sword Heart. Otherwise, even disciples with top-grade spiritual roots will be rejected by them. Gasp, even top-grade spiritual roots are rejected. What kind of talent is this Sword Heart? Jiang Li could not help but be surprised. Logically speaking, the average cultivation speed of a top-grade spiritual root was 3 times that of a high-grade spiritual root and 9 times that of a medium-grade spiritual root. The Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak would actually reject top-grade spiritual roots. They were truly way too willful. All right, then we can go over and test whether or not we have the talent for Sword Heart. But let's think about which sect we should join after failing. Other than the Shu Mountain Five Elements Peak, the other three sects were Benevolent Travel Temple, 100 Tempering Mountain, and Scripture Storage Valley. Benevolent Travel Temple was a Buddhist sect that specialized in body refinement to cultivate the invulnerable Vajra physique. Just like the Five Elements Peak, it specialized in killing and had extraordinary combat strength. The 100 Tempering Mountain was an auxiliary sect that specialized in weapon forging and spirit pill refinement. They might not be good at fighting, but half of the spirit pills and artifacts in the Great Mountain region came from this sect. When Jiang Li first saw the final Scripture Storage Valley, he thought that it was an extremely ancient sect. That was why it had the confidence to call itself the Scripture Storage. Unexpectedly, it was the youngest sect out of the four. Its history was less than 200 years old. It was said that it was formed by a group of rogue cultivators. The reason seemed to be due to the excavation of an ancient ruin. As for the exact details, it was unknown from their low-end information channels. As he spoke, the venue of the Immortal Ascension Assembly was already in sight. It was a utopia-like place. Wooden courtyards of various sizes formed a small town. At this moment, the venue was already filled with people. Many soon-to-be disciples like Jiang Li, who were not even 16 years old, had excited expressions on their faces as they walked in and out of the numerous courtyards within the small town. All right, young masters and young mistresses, welcome to the Immortal Ascension Assembly. You will decide on your sects here and follow your senior brothers and elders back to your sects to cultivate. I, Fu Zhang, can only send you all here. Now you can enter the venue and choose your sect. In the venue, each courtyard represents a sect. At the entrance of each courtyard, there is a stone tablet with information about the sects on it. You guys can check every single stone tablet. However, I'll give you guys a piece of advice. Once you enter the sect, you can't regret it. Any betrayal will be punished by the sect. Lastly, if you wish to join the Immortal Ascension Pavilion, please proceed to the 7th residence on the left. After Fu Zhang took one last look at everyone, his figure disappeared. The soon-to-be disciples entered the venue and mingled with the first batch of disciples. Jiang Li and his companion led the 19 people behind them. Their goal was clear as they headed straight for the courtyard, where the Shu Mountain Five Elements Peak was located. There were indeed quite a number of people gathered there. After all, the reputation of the #1 immortal sect of the Great Mountain region was there. Many people wanted to give it a try. They saw a youth holding a rusty longsword pointing straight ahead. Then, the youth gently placed a piece of white paper on the edge of the sword with a proud expression. The white paper has not been torn. You are unqualified. With that, the sword-wielding youth put down his rusty sword and returned to the crowd. This test seems to be for people to use a rusty sword to cut the paper without slashing their sword. Jiang Li was dumbfounded. What kind of test was this? Could it be that the rusty sword had a hidden secret? Appraisal was used skillfully. Name: rusted iron sword. Type: weapon. Grade: none. Note: a useless piece of junk. It really looked like an ordinary rusty sword. Senior brother, what do we have to do for this test? We really can't understand it. Senior brother, please demonstrate how to pass it. Jiang Li and Yan Hong watched from the side, and after a few more people failed, Jiang Li finally could not refrain himself from taking 2 steps forward, cupped his hands, and asked. The sword cultivator from Five Element Peak opened his eyes slightly and glanced at Jiang Li before snorting coldly, as if he was slightly displeased by Jiang Li's question. However, he still reached out and pulled out a rusty sword beside him. He raised it horizontally in front of him, then picked up a piece of white paper and gently placed it on the edge of the rusty sword. The piece of paper slowly floated down. When it came into contact with the long sword, the piece of paper that should have been blocked by the flat and blunt blade actually slid down without any delay, splitting into 2 pieces that drifted down with the wind. This... Jiang Li was stupefied as his face was filled with disbelief. This did not make sense. A sword may rust, but not the heart. This is a quality that every sword cultivator must have. The expressions of Jiang Li and the others fell into the senior brother's eyes. This meant that he had succeeded in showing off this time, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. He was in a good mood, and he even gave a few words of explanation. "Senior brother, can I try?" Jiang Li took the sword and shook it vigorously. With a clang, a large amount of rust fell off the sword, making it look much better. "Senior brother, come on." The corners of the swordsman's eyes twitched, and he was speechless. He cheated right in front of everyone. Why was he acting so confident? However, he did not care. He casually picked up the paper and put it on. Sure enough, Jiang Li, who had lost himself in the brilliance of the world, had utterly no affinity with the sword heart, and even shaking off the rust could not sharpen the sword. The piece of paper stopped on the blade without any suspense, and it meant that he had failed the test. Then Yan Hong also went on stage to take the test. Similarly, he was without this talent. The two of them could only leave like this. The two top universities in China. Chapter 13, Wang Sanqi. Jiang Li, I do not wish to become a monk. How about we go to the 100 Tempering Mountain? At the very least, the artifacts and spirit pills are much easier to obtain there than anywhere else. It will definitely be very helpful to our cultivation. The 100 Tempering Mountain was indeed as he had said. Every year, there would be a lot of medium and low-level artifacts produced. For someone like Yan Hong, who loved doing business, it was indeed a very tempting thing to be able to get hold of first-hand goods. However, when Jiang Li saw the 2 rows of names of the sect higher-ups, he frowned. The sect leader Sidu Fengzhu, the second elder Sidu Tingxin, the weaponry refinement elder Sidu Beige, and the foreign affairs elder Sidu Yidong. First elder Ma Liuqi, third elder Ma Lichu, alchemy elder Ma Minglu, and medicine elder Ma Chenggu. In the booklet, there were quite a number of high-ranking elders of various positions in the 100 Tempering Mountain. However, all of them had either of these 2 surnames. One must know that the history of the 100 Tempering Mountain had most definitely surpassed 500 years. However, in all these years, not a single disciple with a different surname had ever managed to emerge in power. If there was no strange rule that they had to change their names to become higher-ups, one could imagine just how difficult it would be for them to obtain promotion and benefits from this clan-style sect. There was no way weak newbies like them could withstand the power of nepotism. Jiang Li really did not have the interest to go over and have his youth ruined by such a sect. After Jiang Li's explanation, Yan Hong broke out in a cold sweat as well. He did not want his entire life of hard work to benefit the relatives of the sect elders. In that kind of sect, although it seemed like the treatment was good, once you get into a conflict with the disciples of those 2 families, justice was simply a joke. Looks like we don't have many choices left. The 2 of them brought their lackeys around the venue and analyzed the pros and cons of the various sects in a low voice. Finally, they walked to the entrance of the scripture storage valley. Compared to the other 3 top sects, the advantage of the scripture storage valley was not obvious. There were even many major flaws. For example, they had been established for too short a period of time, and their sect's heritage was lacking. For example, it was established by unaffiliated rogue cultivators. The distribution of higher-ups was too complex. Although the problem of factions was not as deep-rooted as the 100 Tempering Mountain, it still existed. It was said that there were even demonic cultivators among the rogue cultivators who had joined. From time to time, there would be cases of disciples dying mysteriously. When it came to the field of expertise, because they were all rogue cultivators in the past, most of the things they knew were not systematic. They knew a lot but were not experts in anything. Therefore, whether it was refining weapons, refining pills, or drawing talismans, they all knew a little, but they were not very capable. Compared to the other 3 sects of the same level, the scripture storage valley was much more mediocre. However, Jiang Li and Yan Hong still chose it in the end. This was because, in terms of size, Scripture Storage Valley was indeed considered first-rate in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region. Moreover, it only took 200 years to reach this level. In the cultivation world, 200 years might not be enough for the rise and fall of a generation. This meant that this sect had a very promising future. In the future, there was hope that under the hard work of their generation, they could completely surpass the other three sects. For young people like them who had great potential, such a promising sect was still a place worth fighting for their entire lives. Okay, fine. This was not the main reason. The real reason was that Benevolent Travel Temple mainly cultivated the metal and earth attributes, while 100 Tempering Mountain mainly cultivated the fire attribute. The Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak had all 5 elements, but they did not want the two of them. Jiang Li had a dual attribute yin and wood spiritual root, while Yan Hong had a water attribute spiritual root, so they actually had no other choice. It was said that only the Scripture Storage Valley with countless cultivation methods in its storage could allow them to obtain the most suitable technique for themselves. When they entered the Scripture Storage Valley's gate, it was already quite spacious inside. The others did not have as many thoughts as them. Most of them already chose their sects. Cultivators worked quickly. It did not take long for disciples to register and sign contracts. Jiang Li and the others walked in and saw 20 long carved tables placed in the courtyard. And standing behind the long tables were not real people, but 20 wooden puppets wearing clothes with vivid expressions. Heh, there are many newbies again. Behind the table, the puppets that had been quietly standing suddenly moved. Their joints creaked as they moved. Their movements were different, and they could even open their mouths and speak human language. A few of the lackeys behind them were so frightened that they wanted to turn around and run away, but Jiang Li and Yan Hong quickly stopped them and kicked them down. They then cupped their hands in the direction of the wooden puppet and hurriedly apologized. "We are sorry for our rudeness." The lackeys realized what was going on and hurriedly bowed. "Haha, it's fine, it's fine. You are not the first disciples to be scared." One of the wooden puppets laughed and waved its hand. The actions were no different from a real person. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm an elder of the Scripture Storage Valley's Mystic Gate Hall. You can call me Xianxia." Another puppet with a serious expression began to speak. "Elder Xianxia." Everyone bowed again. However, there were a total of 20 puppets moving around in front of them, and none of them knew which direction to salute in. "Are you here to join the Scripture Storage Valley?" The puppets beckoned them to come forward a little. "Our Scripture Storage Valley is one of the best sects in the Great Mountain region. According to the rules of the sect, after you enter our Scripture Storage Valley, you can choose any basic cultivation method to cultivate. Every week, there will be a public lecture by the sect elders. Every month, resources will be allocated to assist in cultivation, and through paying spirit stones and sect contribution points, many cultivation methods, spell techniques, medicinal pills, and artifacts can be exchanged." The wooden puppet shook its head as it spoke. Jiang Li discovered that most of the basic treatment did not differ too much from the other sects. However, Xianxia mentioned several times about choosing cultivation methods and spell techniques during his introduction. It seemed that he was very confident in the sect's collection. "I understand. Elder Xianxia, may I know what we should do after joining the sect?" Jiang Li understood that such benefits came with responsibility. High-level cultivators could easily live for hundreds or thousands of years. They were much more unlikely to leave an inheritance so early compared to mortals who could only live for dozens of years. Even if they really wanted to pass on their legacy, people with their spiritual root aptitude would not be chosen. "We won't charge any fees for joining the sect. In the first year after joining the sect, all you need to do is cultivate in peace without any compulsory requirements. However, after a year, all the outer sect disciples will have to start accepting sect missions. Of course, missions are either difficult and easy. Even if your strength can't keep up, you can still accept some laborious missions. You can rest assured about this. Because of the history of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance, The scripture storage valley seemed a little stingy in the early stages of investment. The other sects would usually give new disciples a buffer period of 2 to 3 years before arranging for them to accept missions. For many disciples with inferior-grade spiritual roots, it was hard to say whether they could even take the first step in cultivation after a year. Jiang Li and Yan Hong glanced at each other before the former spoke. "Elder Xianxia, we are willing to enter the scripture storage valley." The puppets looked at him together. "There are already people following you even before you entered the sect. You're not bad. This will make you have an easier time in the outer sect. Don't just stand there. Come and fill in the information before signing the contract." The 21 of them split up in front of the 20 puppets. There was no need for them to line up. They picked up 2 pieces of paper and began to fill them in. This cultivation world believed in karma and fate, so it was especially strict about the disciples' backgrounds. Where did he live? What was his name? How many parents and family members did he have? What did he do before this? Was he married? Did he have no children? Did he kill anyone? Did he start a fire before? Did he kill a man or a woman? Was the fire big or small? If Jiang Li had a good memory, he could even be requested to write his family's ancestral records. In short, Jiang Li would fill in whatever he knew, and after studying the terms of the sect contract for a long time, he signed his name. You have a dual-attribute spiritual root. Not bad, not bad. You've made the right choice to join the scripture storage valley." Jiang Li had a puzzled look on his face. Could it be that there was some other secret? "Elder, please enlighten me." After handing over the wooden tablet, Jiang Li walked into the courtyard and finally saw Elder Xianxia, who was controlling the puppet. Kid, do you know the difference between a dual-attribute spiritual root and a single-attribute spiritual root?" Xianxia's figure was a bit short, a bit inferior compared to these 13 or 14-year-old children. His hair was gray and white, but his complexion was rosy, not the slightest bit aged. He held a large wine jar in his hands, about to take a sip after saying a few words. He did not answer Jiang Li's question directly. Instead, he asked this question. Cultivators with dual-attribute spiritual root can easily master spell techniques of 2 elements and have stronger combat power. After Jiang Li found out about the attributes of his spiritual root, he had asked someone to inquire about this information. However, the opinions he received were all very one-sided. He could only tell what he knew. Yes, but that's not all. Having spell techniques of 2 elements means that you can deal with more situations. It's easier to gain an advantage when fighting with others. You need to know that wood attribute cultivation methods can only increase one's wood attribute cultivation base. Similarly, yin attribute cultivation methods can only increase one's yin attribute cultivation base. However, if you cultivate 2 cultivation methods at the same time, you will definitely slow down your cultivation speed. As a result, you will be far inferior to cultivators who only cultivate 1 cultivation method. Therefore, many cultivators with a dual-attribute spiritual root will give up and cultivate only one of the 2. Jiang Li thought about it and felt that it made sense. However, since the other party said so, there must be a solution. He calmed his anxious heart and continued listening. "Elder, please enlighten me." Chapter 14, New Disciples. "Haha, young man, don't be afraid. That's why I said you were lucky. Joining our scripture storage valley is your best option. Our scripture storage valley has tens of thousands of cultivation methods and countless incomplete secret texts. When the time comes, as long as you choose a dual-attribute cultivation method that is compatible with your own attributes, not only will you be able to cultivate both yin and wood together, you might even be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort." This was the first time Jiang Li had heard of a dual-attribute cultivation method. However, this was also very reasonable. It was just like how the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak had a way to allow the talent of Sword Heart to unleash power that surpassed the limits of the spiritual root grade. Dual-attribute spiritual roots were also a type of talent. When there was no suitable cultivation method, it would be of little value, and there was little use in forcefully developing it. Only by possessing a suitable cultivation method would one be able to fully display the advantages of having a dual-attribute spiritual root. Thank you, Elder. After Jiang Li expressed his thanks again, he and the others followed a puppet to the backyard. It was also a large ship, and its size was no smaller than the one that had sent them here. However, what made people gasp even more was that such an exaggeratedly huge thing was quietly suspended several meters above the ground, floating slightly like a balloon. When Jiang Li got closer, he discovered that there were some complicated patterns engraved on the ship that were similar to those on the spirit testing array. He did not know what principles were used to counteract such a huge gravitational force. Jiang Li, let's go. Yan Hong stood on the gangway and could not wait any longer. He could not help but urge Jiang Li as he looked around. A group of 21 people boarded the airship of Scripture Storage Valley under the lead of Jiang Li and Yan Hong. Hey, fellow disciples, it seems we have new companions. On the airship's deck, 12 youths of the same age were chatting and laughing. When they saw Jiang Li and the others coming up, they all looked over. Hello, are you new disciples too? Yan Hong and Jiang Li naturally went up to talk, while the 19 low-grade spiritual root disciples behind them stood where they were, obediently not moving at all. Hello, I'm Jiang Li, this is Yan Hong, he introduced himself. Haha, hello, I'm Xianxia. We're all fellow disciples now, so let's get to know each other. Xianxia was very enthusiastic and brought them into their circle. This is Xianxia from the family of Wild Waves River. He has a high-grade spiritual root aptitude. A thin youth with bronze-colored skin nodded at them. If Jiang Li did not remember wrongly, this was also a martial arts family in the pugilistic world. Their legacy technique, Heartbreak Sword, seemed to be very sinister and vicious. I've heard of you. I've long heard of the Jiang family's Age Tiger technique. If there's a chance, we can exchange pointers. Xianxia had been holding a thin sword the entire time. Although he looked very cold and aloof, after seeing the arrival of the new group and discovering that Jiang Li was someone of the same kind, he immediately greeted with a martial artist's mannerism. Little did they know that although Jiang Li came from a martial arts family, he did not understand these things at all. Brother, you're too polite. I haven't practiced our martial arts to the point of perfection, so I won't embarrass myself. Everyone was about to start cultivating, so why was he still thinking about martial arts? Haha, Brother Jiang, Brother Yan, let me continue introducing you. This is Wang Liuliang. He has a high-grade spiritual root. This was a young man dressed like a scholar. He waved the fan in his hand as a form of greeting. This is Lu Qianqian. She has a medium-grade spiritual root. This was a very petite girl. She wore a beautiful blue cloud-patterned dress, and she looked shy and timid when she greeted anyone. This is Tang Wengxin. He has a medium-grade spiritual root. This is Kong Qingzhu and Pang Xiao. They both have medium-grade spiritual roots. When they reached this point, the 12 of them looked at Jiang Li and Yan Hong at the same time. Clearly, their self-introduction had been too simple. The grade of the spiritual root was what they were concerned about. Then let me reintroduce myself. I am Jiang Li, and I possess a medium-grade spiritual root. This is Yan Hong. He has a high-grade spiritual root. Hearing this, the 12 people smiled again. After all, everyone had just entered the cultivation world and were currently poor. Spiritual roots were the only criteria for making friends. This could be seen from the fact that they were all disciples with medium-grade spiritual roots and above. HMPH, a bunch of outer sect disciples. Instead of focusing on cultivation, they are forming factions here, truly ignorant. At this moment, a boy in a white robe walked out of the cabin. His robe was fluttering in the wind, and there was a word storage embroidered on his chest with red threads. This style was very similar to the clothes worn by Elder Wang Sanqi's wooden puppet. It seemed to be the standard disciple uniform of the Scripture Storage Valley. That person spoke very arrogantly. For some reason, he reprimanded them out of nowhere. Seeing that everyone ignored him, he felt bored and walked back into the cabin after blowing on the deck for a while. "Who is that? He looks about the same age as us. Could he be one of the senior martial brothers in the sect?" Jiang Li then asked them. Judging from their expressions, they should know each other. "Humph him. He's Xianxia. He has a top-grade spiritual root, a genius disciple from our batch. He became an inner sect disciple right after joining the sect. He just changed his clothes and he's already putting on airs as an inner sect disciple." Humph. Xianxia's expression was ugly. He was jealous and indignant. A top-grade spiritual root, a genius who can enter the inner sect directly. No wonder he dares to speak like that. If we can endure it, then we should endure it. After entering the sect, the difference in status between inner and outer sect disciples is extremely great, and the rules are strict. If we see him again, we'll probably have to call him senior brother. He's an inner disciple, so he can take an elder as his master and receive guidance. He'll receive more resources and better treatment than us. It might not be long before he leaves us in the dust. Everyone's enmity towards the talented was triggered and they started chatting. Hearing this, Xianxia's expression sank. There were very few high-grade spiritual roots among the countless disciples. They could definitely be called geniuses. However, compared to top-grade spiritual roots, they were clearly much weaker. After talking for a long time, Jiang Li and Jiang Li finally recalled the 19 lackeys and told them to find a place to stay in the cabin. "Brother Yan, Brother Jiang, why are you bringing them along? People with low-grade spiritual roots can't help much. They'll only be a burden to you." After Xianxia, Xianxia and the rest found out about their aptitude, they started to despise them. Even before they entered the sect, their sense of class was already deeply rooted. "Yes, we will pay attention to it. Spiritual root aptitude is indeed very important to cultivators." Jiang Li smiled and did not say much. No matter how poor their spiritual roots were, or even if they were mortals, they still had their own value. Otherwise, why would the cultivation world recruit so many low-quality disciples? Without their diligent work to fill the bottom ranks, wouldn't it be necessary for a high-level cultivator to clean the toilet himself? As they conversed, they learned that Xianxia and the petite beauty Lu Qianqian both had a bit of immortal cultivator background. It was hard to say exactly how much power they had, but it also gave them a lot of general knowledge about the cultivation world. According to what they said, those outer disciples of large sects were actually far from being as harmonious as everyone imagined them to be. In the scripture storage valley, the number of outer disciples was always around 8,000. They formed groups while competing openly and secretly, maliciously fought and robbed, and also bullied people while taking their money. These were all common occurrences. Hence, in order to protect their own interests and defend against possible attacks, Xianxia decided to rope in the medium to high-aptitude disciples to form a team. Jiang Li and Yan Hong naturally had no objections. They would not easily trust strangers who met by chance, but having more friends was better than having more enemies. Jiang Li and the others were probably the last batch of disciples to arrive at the venue. After the sun set, the people standing on the deck could see that in the direction of the Shu Mountain Five Elements Peak, there was a row of cultivators rising into the sky. After tossing out their flying swords, they rode on their swords and disappeared from sight in a few blinks of the eye. It was still better for them. There were fewer disciples, so they could just let their senior brothers and elders take them away on their swords. The scripture storage valley, however, recruited 600–700 people in this immortal ascension assembly. It was impossible to bring them back without using this flying ship. Soon, Elder Wang Sanqi and the other inner disciples returned to the ship, and the new disciples were chased into the cabin. The speed of the flying ship was too fast, and they did not have any cultivation. Without the protection of cultivators, how could they withstand the violent winds? "All right, everyone is tired. Go and rest. In 2 more days, we will be able to see the scripture storage valley." Xianxia was more tactful, and found 2 decent rooms for Jiang Li and Yan Hong. The room was not big, but it looked rather exquisite. Unlike the previous ship on the lake, this flying ship was clearly of a higher grade. There was even a round crystal embedded in the sideboard of the cabin. The crystal was in the shape of a convex lens. If one looked out directly, the scenery would not be clear, but if they gently turned the dials around the crystal porthole, a ray of light would shoot out from the crystal and hit the wooden wall behind, showing a magnificent scene. Unknowingly, another day and 2 nights passed. When the light of dawn shone through the crystal lens the next day, the rumbling snores in Jiang Li's room suddenly died down. As he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, a thin layer of dust on the ground was blown up. It did not dissipate until it hit the wooden wall 2 meters away. Did I finally break through to become an internal martial artist? Name Jiang Li. Age 13. Race human. Main class, martial artist level, first rate. Subclass 1, none. Subclass 2, none. Health, 989-80. Stamina, 868-60. Strength, 3.5. Speed, 2.9. Constitution, 3.9 plus 0.5. Mind, 1. Enlightenment, 1.1. Martial art, Age Tiger Technique level 8. Skill Appraisal level 3, Mountain Splitter level 3. Positive status, slow healing, satiety, body strengthening, manly vigor. Negative status, none. Jiang Li felt his blood essence and strength nearly double. He was slightly happy, but did not pay too much attention to it. If nothing unexpected happened, his martial arts cultivation would end here. They were about to arrive at the sect and officially start their cultivation life. Even if he were to spend some time on martial arts, it would be a waste. It was already a consolation for his family that he was able to break through to become an internal martial artist before this new life. Chapter 15. Choosing Cultivation Method. Clang, clang, clang. A heavy bell chime sounded. This was the same signal as when they set off. It meant that they had arrived at their destination. His body leaned forward slightly, and he could clearly sense that the flying ship was slowing down. Soon the corridor outside became noisy. After all, they were still a group of children, so they were very enthusiastic about fresh things. It was not until the flying ship descended to a certain height that the locked cabin doors opened. The new disciples swarmed onto the deck and screamed. It had to be said that the scenery in this world was far more magnificent than the earth in his previous life. The wind in front of them was still strong, and when they looked at the enormous gorge that was enveloped by golden light, a silent shock struck the hearts of all the disciples. That was the Scripture Storage Valley. The airship slowly landed on a flat spaceport. After the entire ship shook slightly, it announced that their journey to seek immortality had officially started. All outer disciples, come to me to collect your disciple uniform and outer sect identity token. Each disciple will take 2 sets of clothes of the same size. If there are any lost or damaged items, you will have to purchase new ones yourself. Unlike the elegant white robes of inner sect disciples, outer sect disciples' uniforms were more practical. The inner wear was a gray garment, and the outer wear was a navy blue robe. It was resistant to dirt and tearing. Touching the fabric, it was smooth and supple. It was obviously several grades better than the clothes worn by the officials in the mortal world. Any item that leaked out from the cultivation world would be a rare treasure in the mortal world. Our Scripture Storage Valley was established in the year 2134 of the 9 provinces calendar, and it has been 255 years since then. We had 11 founders, but there are only 7 left who are still protecting our sect. After receiving the items, everyone continued to follow the group. Elder Wang Xianxia slowly narrated the history and culture of the Scripture Storage Valley as he walked. 255 years was enough time for several dynasties to complete the cycle of prosperity and decline. However, for the cultivation world, this was a bit too short. More than half of the original founders of the Scripture Storage Valley still remained. the entrance to Scripture Storage Valley, was the mouth of this golden rock canyon. From the entrance of the valley, it looked like a desolate and rugged landscape. However, under Elder Xianxia's lead, they seemed to have passed through a layer of mist and the world before their eyes suddenly opened up. The space within the valley was extremely large. It was at least 10 times larger than what one could see from outside the valley. Moreover, there was not the slightest bit of desolation. There were flowers, plants, fish, and insects. People were living everywhere. This is the outer area of the sect. You'll be spending a long period of your life in cultivation here. If you want to truly join the inner sect, you'll have to work hard to cultivate in the future. This is Elder Lu, your outer sect elder. He will be in charge of everything in the future. Greetings, Elder Lu. Everyone bowed to Elder Lu, but he only nodded and did not say anything. He put on a sour face and looked like he had a bad temper. Next, all of you will follow Elder Lu to distribute the rooms. Change into your outer sect clothes and gather here. Remember, I will only wait for half an hour. After saying that, Elder Lu of the outer sect walked towards a direction without saying a word. Although his body was hunched, his speed was not slow at all. The disciples could only barely keep up with him after running. The places in the sect are all very dangerous. If you don't want to die tragically, don't step into places you are not familiar with. Elder Lu brought them to a rather cold and empty dormitory district. It seemed that the new outer sect disciples were not arranged to be together with the previous disciples. The rooms from 1 to 752 are all empty. The keys are all on the door. You can decide on your own. After saying that, Elder Lu acted as if he had completed a task. He ignored the new disciples and turned to leave. Only then did the new disciples react. They hurriedly went to choose a dormitory to occupy a good spot. One look at these 700 dormitories, and one could tell that there were good and bad ones. The worst one was probably a leaky straw hut, built in a dark, damp corner with insects crawling and rats biting. On the other hand, it could be a small 2-story building. Not only were all the facilities complete, but there would also be a large courtyard in front and behind the house. At this time, the advantage of teamwork was revealed. Xianxia, who had a top-grade spiritual root, directly entered the inner sect. Thus, among all the new outer sect disciples, Jiang Li's team was undoubtedly the number one. In addition to him and Yan Hong, there were 14 medium-grade and high-grade spiritual root disciples here. Ordinary people did not dare to offend them. Even if they wanted to offend them, with Jiang Li, an internal martial artist, holding the fort, what could a group of 13 or 14-year-old children do? Without spending much effort, they managed to obtain the best dorms. Even the 19 low-grade spiritual root disciples that followed Jiang Li and the others were taken care of and assigned to decent rooms. The group did not dare to waste any time. After changing their clothes quickly, the group of hundreds of people looked no different from the outer sect disciples they had seen previously. Not daring to let the elders wait any longer, the majority of the disciples returned to their previous location 20 minutes later. The rest of the people were also anxious as they watched. They ran out of the dormitory and gathered while tying their belts. However, no matter where or when, there were always some people who liked to not be punctual. Half an hour had passed, and almost all of the disciples had already stood in front of Elder Xianxia. However, 2 minutes later, 2 youths were still chatting and laughing as they walked over. Seeing that everyone was looking at them, they quickly ran forward and prepared to blend into the crowd. Seems like there's always people who don't like to follow the rules. Xianxia put down the wine jug and casually swept his right sleeve, causing 2 jet-black rays of light to shoot out and instantly enter their knees. With 2 screams, the 2 youths fell to the ground. They hugged their knees and cried. My leg is broken. Name, bone-piercing nail. Type, Dharma artifact. Grade, low-grade yellow rank. Note, a hidden weapon that can be tempered with poison. Jiang Li threw an appraisal skill at it. He did not know whether he should mourn for them or scold them that they deserved it. When a mortal was struck by an artifact, even if it was the lowest low-grade yellow rank, their legs could absolutely be declared crippled. HMPH, everyone follow me, I don't want this to happen again. No matter how good Wang Sanqi's temper was, he was still an elder. Even inner sect disciples could not disrespect him, let alone two useless outer sect disciples. After saying that, he did not care if the two fellows who were rolling on the ground could keep up with him. He led everyone towards the door again. I'm going to take you to the scripture storage pavilion to select your own chi refinement cultivation method. If you don't work hard enough, this might be your last chance to enter the inner sect. Remember, do not look or talk casually when inside. The first day he entered the sect, he had the chance to enter the sect's sacred scripture storage pavilion. This made Jiang Li involuntarily feel a little excited. After all, it was not as if he had not read thousands of cultivation novels in his previous life. Every time the main character went to the scripture storage pavilion, the treasure vault, or even the garbage dump, there would definitely be good stuff hidden in places like this. After coughing twice and controlling his emotions, Jiang Li and the others had already stood in front of a metal door. The metal gate was completely embedded in the cliff wall. The entire scripture storage pavilion was actually dug out after emptying the stone wall. The first level of the scripture storage pavilion is full of chi refinement cultivation methods. You don't have to look at the skill technique section. The basic cultivation methods are all on the bookshelf on the right side of the first level. Each bookshelf has a classification of the attribute of the cultivation method. Everyone only has half an hour. After choosing, I will register it here. Remember, only choose a cultivation method that corresponds to your own attribute. There will be no second chance. After he finished speaking, the metal door slowly opened. The dim space inside also automatically lit up, illuminating the huge space inside. Let's go in. Jiang Li and Yan Hong talked to each other before entering the first floor. Following the instructions, they arrived at the cultivation method area on the right. Dozens of large bookshelves were placed there, and hundreds of people entered in batches. It did not seem crowded at all. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were the most common types of spiritual roots of the 5 elements. Naturally, the cultivation methods that were discovered were also the most common. Almost 70% of the bookshelf's cultivation methods were of the 5 elements. Yan Hong decisively joined in the selection of the water attribute cultivation method, while Jiang Li continued forward. He began to search for books suitable for dual attribute spiritual roots according to the notes on the bookshelf. Fire Earth, Water Wood, Metal Fire, Yin Water, Yin Wood dual attribute cultivation methods. He had finally found it. Jiang Li heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he still had a chance to choose. He glanced at the bookshelf. There were only 3 manuals. They were folded weakly, forming a sharp contrast with the 5 elements cultivation manuals that were filled to the brim. Coffin burial art, ghost wood art, deadwood extraction method. Why did it sound like they're all so dark and evil? As a cultured person, shouldn't he be looking at more positive things? Helpless, Jiang Li could only pick up the 3 books and read their introductions. In reality, he could only see the introduction. The rest of the content was sealed by the scripture storage pavilion's array formation and could not be forcefully opened. The introduction of the cultivation method mainly described the characteristics of the cultivation method and the achievements of the cultivators who had cultivated it. After carefully comparing the 3 cultivation methods, he discovered that only the deadwood extraction method had annotations that it was an ancient cultivation method. Unfortunately, the cultivation method was incomplete and only contained the part for the chi refinement realm. It was naturally impossible for Jiang Li to choose a cultivation method that could only be used in the chi refinement realm. However, he was also very interested in the word ancient. Previously, he had heard that the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak originated from the ancient Shu Mountain Sword sect. The scripture storage valley had also started because of an ancient ruin. But what exactly happened in the ancient times? After all, the world was always developing according to common sense. There was no reason for things created now to be worse than before. Chapter 16, Ghostwood Art. Jiang Li put the matter of the ancient times aside for the time being. It was meaningless to rely on guesses. He continued to look at the other two ancient manuals. Coffin Burial Art was a manual passed down by a rogue cultivator clan specializing in corpse manipulation in the past. Later on, the clan fell into decline, so the descendants brought the manual to the scripture storage valley. The cultivation method became part of the collection here. It was said that during the most glorious period of their clan, there was once a nascent soul cultivator. This was also the limit of this cultivation method. The ghostwood art was somewhat special. It was not originally created by humans, but came from an old ghostwood tree that had cultivated 1,000 years to become a tree spirit. According to the records, the tree spirit was extremely ferocious back then. It had once turned hundreds of miles of mountains and rivers into a graveyard. Its cultivation had reached the earth-immortal realm that surpassed the nascent soul realm. In the end, the heavens were enraged, and the 1,000-year-old spirit tree died under the lightning tribulation. Only then did the descendants discover the ghostwood art on the remaining tree trunk. Jiang Li's expression was a bit bitter. Of these two ancient texts, one required him to lie in a coffin and cultivate underground, while the other had him sleep in the graveyard every day to cultivate. After cultivating either of these, he was afraid that he would be easily eradicated by others in the future as a demonic cultivator. Furthermore, he had always thought that a cultivation method should allow him to progress all the way to the level of a true immortal. He did not expect that these cultivation methods actually had a limit. After letting out a long sigh, Jiang Li still chose the ghostwood art as his initial cultivation method. First of all, the upper limit of the ghostwood art was obviously higher than the coffin burial art. Also, he could not stand being buried underground in a coffin every day. After selecting the cultivation method, Jiang Li walked towards the exit of the scripture storage pavilion. Because he could only choose between 3 books, he naturally was the fastest. At this moment, most of the disciples, including Yan Hong, were still gathered in front of the bookshelves. In front of the metal door, the old man and elder Xianxia, who had opened the door for them earlier, were sitting behind a counter in the middle, discussing which type of spirit wine was more delicious. "Elder, I've chosen my cultivation method." Jiang Li respectfully placed the ghostwood art on the counter and waited there obediently. After a short while, the 2 elders behind the counter finished their cups of spirit wine before turning around to look at Jiang Li and the books on the table. "The ghostwood art is quite a good cultivation method. Kid, bow your head." The scripture storage pavilion elder made a few hand seals, and the pages behind the ghostwood art immediately scattered and became accessible to read. "Since you're being polite, I'll help you out a bit more." The elder took out a long and translucent jade strip from under the counter and pressed it on the cultivation manual. Countless black characters crawled out of the book like insects and entered the jade piece that was only a finger wide. A moment later, the 3 words ghostwood art appeared on the jade piece. That elder raised his hand and patted again, pressing the ice-cold jade piece onto Jiang Li's head. "Don't resist, calm your mind and gather your spirit." Since he had just arrived, there was no reason for the other party to harm him, and he did not feel any malice either, so Jiang Li did not dodge and allowed the jade piece to press down on his forehead. In the next moment, a refreshing feeling rushed into his mind, accompanied by a series of mysterious and complicated ink-colored characters that were deeply etched in his memory. "Ghostwood, ghost within the wood. Its roots drink the water of the netherworld. Its leaves cover the moon in the sky." When a ghostwood tree descends upon the earth and overturns the tomb, it must transform into the yin of all things. When it touches things, they become profound, and when it's divine, it becomes clear and easy to understand. When the earth is vast, it's connected through heaven and earth. The wood is dense and verdant. The moon is beautiful and round, and the wind is pleasant and ghastly. No one fights in the vicinity, and there's the aura of calamity in the surroundings, so it's naturally neither noble nor long-lived. All the trees in the region wither and die, the earth tomb is crooked, and the dark crow beast tramples upon it. The surroundings are desolate, the front and back are flawed, and it nurtures a lonely and sinister ghost. In just a few breaths, thousands of ink characters and 10 complex images flooded into his mind. For a moment, Jiang Li leaned on the counter with both hands. His mind was in a daze for a long time. Haha boy, just faint, that's right. You haven't even started chi refinement and you've already used a jade slip. Consider this your good luck. This voice belonged to Elder Xianxia. At this moment, Jiang Li felt a gentle force lifting his swaying body and placing him on a futon. You can thank Elder Li after you've stabilized yourself. Jiang Li held his temples and rubbed them continuously. The dizziness was quickly fading. A jade slip. Was that a jade slip? It was very similar to the bamboo strips used to make ancient bamboo slips. Moreover, he had stuffed thousands of words and images into his memory. This method was really amazing. A few minutes later, the discomfort was gone. He suddenly thought of something and immediately opened his character panel. Indeed, on the Cultivation method column, the words Ghostwood Art Chi Refinement Chapter Level 0 appeared. So it was only the Chi Refinement chapter. Slightly disappointed, he opened his eyes and realized that there were already quite a number of youths who were bitterly humming while copying down the content of the manual. It seemed that the others did not receive the same treatment as him. Actually, no, the few disciples with high-grade spiritual roots were the same as him. They sat crookedly on the mats, frowning and holding their foreheads. They must have been instilled with cultivation methods in jade slips too. Thank you, Elder Li. Thank you, Elder Wang. Jiang Li stepped forward once more and bowed as he cupped his hands. This jade slip contained a detailed explanation of the cultivation method, and it saved him a few days of hard study at least. Compared to those young people who were still copying books and did not even know how to read, it was indeed a huge advantage. Yes, this is your first month's allowance in the outer sect. You can collect it from the outer sect internal affairs hall every month in the future. Don't miss out on the lectures at the outer sect study hall every week. All right, you may go back and cultivate now. The two elders nodded and did not care much about his gratitude. After Xianxia threw out a cloth bag, he gave a final reminder and sent him back. Jiang Li waited outside the door for a few minutes before Yan Hong walked out of the scripture storage pavilion. The two of them walked back to the outer sect area in a low-profile manner. When they returned to their residence, they opened their sacks and placed everything on the table. Jiang Li had 3 spirit stones and 2 bottles of spirit pills. The bottle was not full. He looked at the label and counted the pills inside. There were 10 Qi Nourishing Pills and 10 Qi Recovery Pills. Name: Qi Nourishing Pill. Type: Medicinal Pill. Grade: Low-grade yellow rank. Note: it can help with cultivation. Name: Qi Recovery Pill. Type: Medicinal Pill. Grade: Low-grade yellow rank. Note: it can replenish spiritual qi. As expected, they were all low-grade yellow-rank medicinal pills. He then looked at Yan Hong, who was sitting opposite him. His monthly allowance was 5 spirit stones, 20 Qi Nourishing Pills, and 20 Qi Recovery Pills. It was nearly twice as much as Jiang Li's. This treatment was indeed very different. Jiang Li, these are for you. Yan Hong took out a spirit stone and 5 Qi Nourishing Pills from his monthly allowance and pushed them towards Jiang Li. This meant that he wanted to share resources equally with Jiang Li. In the early stages of cultivation, everyone was poor. Every resource was very precious. Jiang Li was touched that Yan Hong could do this. But to him, the quantity of medicinal pills actually did not have much meaning. No, that's not necessary. My cultivation method is rather special. My requirement for resources is different from ordinary disciples. Besides, didn't we agree that we would split the profits equally? I won't be polite when it comes to that. Yan Hong wanted to say something else, but Jiang Li did not reject him directly. Instead, he said that they needed different resources, so he could only give up. "All right, but if I leave you in the dust, don't come crying and regret it. Get lost, you'll be the one crying." After bragging for a while, the two of them parted ways. They could not wait to try their first cultivation session. Sitting cross-legged with his palms and feet facing the sky, Jiang Li assumed the posture he used to practice martial arts. Soon after, he began to slowly visualize, according to the description and diagrams in his mind. In his mind, a seed slowly appeared. It was a seed of a ghostwood tree with a grayish-brown surface and a tiny crack on the edge. 15 minutes. Half an hour. After an hour later, Jiang Li let out a long breath, feeling as if his entire body was about to freeze. He did not succeed. He was still thousands of miles away from mastering the ghostwood art. With his experience as an internal force martial artist, it should be easier for him to sense spiritual qi than others. However, after sitting cross-legged for a long time, he only felt a faint sensation. No matter how hard he tried, he could not grasp that feeling. Indeed, the beginning was always the hardest. He really wanted to eat all 10 qi-nourishing pills before cultivating. However, according to the cultivation method, it was best to cultivate the first wisp of ghost-wood spiritual qi on its own. If the first wisp was impure with the help of external forces, there would probably be many hidden dangers in the future. He looked outside. It was still early in the morning. Cultivation emphasized on wealth, companionship, and spiritual lands. The time, place, and people were all crucial. Right now, this time and environment was clearly not suitable for cultivating the yin-wood attribute ghost-wood art. It seemed that he had to wait until night. He temporarily put down his cultivation matter and ran to the window. He inadvertently looked around. It was the first day. Everyone was trying to cultivate and no one was running around. Jiang Li was very satisfied with this, and he closed all the doors and windows before taking out a handkerchief from his pocket. This was a love token given to him by a young girl in the convoy. However, he still did not know her name. Unwrapping the handkerchief, a palm-sized, somewhat flat rock rolled out and hit the wooden table, spinning around. Name: rock with something hidden. Type: trash. Content: unknown. Note: see if curiosity kills you this time. This was the rock he had picked up during his journey. The few scaled demons had been hiding it, especially the white scaled demon. It seemed to have taken a fancy to it. He guessed that it must be something important. He had been calm and collected for such a long time. Now, he had finally found a safe environment to check this stone. Chapter 17. Spiritual Root Seed. Right, I should get a water basin. From the look of the white-haired scaled demon's rock, Jiang Li was 70% sure that there was a scaled demon's egg inside. This was the white-haired scaled demon's child. Then the question was, what was the use of an egg of a scaled demon? He brought over a basin of water, which was filled with half a bucket of well water. Then, like beating an egg, he placed the rock above the basin. His thumbs pressed between the cracks of the rock and he slowly increased his strength. Jiang Li was now a true internal force martial artist. His strength was comparable to a pair of iron pincers, and the nails that were infused with internal force were even sharper and tougher than daggers. The originally imperceptible crack became larger bit by bit. One could see that inside, there was originally a type of white mucus that stuck the stone together. He suddenly exerted strength. Slam! A round object fell out from the rock and landed on the water basin, causing some splashes before floating on the surface of the water. This was a seed. Name: spiritual root seed. Type: trash. Grade: unknown. Note: not recommended for consumption. He had guessed wrongly. What was hidden in this stone was not the egg of a scaled demon, but something that had been appraised as the spiritual root seed. Spiritual root. Could it be the spiritual root that he was thinking of? This thing was called a spiritual root seed. Could it be that if it was planted in the soil and watered, it would grow a spiritual root. Jiang Li was a little confused. Shouldn't spiritual roots be an abstract form of cultivation talent? Apart from his descendant root, he did not think that he had any physical organs that could be called a spiritual root. Moreover, after reading the appraisal result, there was a question mark behind the name of the spiritual root seed. This was a situation that had never happened before. Jiang Li also did not understand what it represented. Strange thing. After confirming that there was really nothing else in the rock, Jiang Li picked up the seed and studied it. Apart from the hard shell of the seed, he did not discover anything else. After some consideration, Jiang Li found a clay pot in the backyard of the dormitory. After filling it with soil, he watered it with water before planting the seed inside. This thing should be quite valuable. The appraisal skill indicated that this thing could not be eaten. Since it was a seed, there should not be any problem looking at it. He placed the pot on the table by the window on the second floor, so that the sunlight could shine through the window. During this time, Yan Hong came again and sent over the monthly allowance from his 19 lackeys. The monthly allowance of low-grade spiritual root disciples was 1 spirit stone, 5 qi nourishing pills, and 5 qi recovery pills. There were a total of 19 spirit stones, 95 qi recovery pills, and 95 qi nourishing pills. The two of them first took back their capital, which meant that Jiang Li had taken 8 spirit stones, while Yan Hong had taken back 2. Then they split the remaining items equally. Although the 19 lackeys did not say it out loud, they were still unhappy about it. It seemed that they would need to be given some psychological counseling after some time. Jiang Li, I heard that a disciple with a high-grade spiritual root would need at least 10 days to get into the qi refinement realm. The slower ones would need a month. Disciples with medium-grade spiritual roots usually need 1 to 3 months, and this is under the condition of meditating every day. As for the inferior grade and low-grade spiritual roots, there's no need to even mention them. Many disciples were unable to draw qi into their bodies even after the first year of the new disciples' term ended. After such a long period of cultivation, both of them felt helpless. I'll take it slow. Once I draw qi into my body, I'll be able to use medicinal pills to aid me. At that time, things will be much easier. They ate dinner together again. To be honest, the food in the outer sect of the scripture storage valley was quite good. There was no limit to the amount of meat and vegetables they could eat. However, all the new outer sect disciples were not in the mood to enjoy delicacies. The two of them ate very quickly. After complaining about how difficult it was to master the cultivation method, their bodies went back to meditating honestly. In the following half a month, Jiang Li spent most of his time exploring the cultivation method. He had attended several public lectures in the outer sect study hall. This study hall actually had classes every day, but it was usually basic studies and reading classes. The social structure of this world was very backward, and knowledge and popularization were very low. Therefore, the usual classes were targeted at these new disciples who were still illiterate. The weekly elder lecture was the thing that was truly valuable. For example, the history of a cultivator's origin, the interpretation of cultivation methods and terminology, the common errors of a cultivation newbie, the things to take note of when taking medicinal pills, etc. Just like the classrooms in his previous life, the disciples loved to listen to the stories of the cultivation world that the elders and senior brothers talked about when they were bragging. Such trivial knowledge rarely appeared in books, but it was essential knowledge on the path of cultivation. Just a little bit of information from these elders would be able to save them a lot of trouble. Today's lesson was really timely. I've been stuck at that part for 5 days without any progress. Tonight, I can definitely improve further. Yan Hong was extremely excited, as if he was about to break through to the qi refinement realm. Me too. Previously, I only noticed the effects of time on cultivation and neglected everything else. No wonder I feel so strange and sluggish every time I cultivate. Jiang Li was also enlightened. "Oh right, where's the thing I asked you to help buy? Is it here?" "Yes, I've already bought it. It's in my courtyard. However, spending a spirit stone for something like this is a huge loss for you this time." Yan Hong looked depressed, but Jiang Li did not seem to mind. The same thing had different value in different people's eyes. Moreover, Jiang Li wanted it urgently. It was inevitable that the price would be a little higher. When he returned to Yan Hong's backyard, there was a log that needed at least 2 people's arms to wrap around it. Jiang Li went forward to take a look at the tree ring. This tree was 69 years old, even older than his 2 lifetimes combined. "Not bad, not bad. Thanks, brother, this is a big help." This was naturally a ghostwood tree. As it was just an ordinary ghostwood tree trunk, it could be bought in the secular world with money. However, it was not easy to find an old ghostwood tree that was over 60 years old. Furthermore, he was in a sect in the cultivation world and was unable to borrow the power of the mortal world. Naturally, he could only spend an expensive spirit stone to purchase it. He reached out to hug the tree trunk and exerted strength with his feet. The internal force of the aged tiger technique spread throughout his entire body. The tree trunk, which was at least 400 kilograms in weight, was lifted up and carried on his shoulders. "I'm going back. With the help of this thing, prepare to call me senior brother." Jiang Li was very confident. He carried the heavy tree trunk and walked far away. Due to the fact that the class ended rather late today, the moon was already hanging high in the sky. He did not return to his dormitory directly, but instead headed towards a remote wasteland in the outer sect. In this half a month's time, he was not some ignorant fool who did not listen to outside matters and had already basically understood the basic terrain of the outer sect. The place he was going to was a graveyard, a burial ground in the outer sect. In the conversation with Xianxia, he had learned that the scripture storage valley recruited 600 to 700 disciples every year, but the number of outer sect disciples was always around 8,000. According to his understanding, there were only a few dozen outer sect disciples who could advance to the inner sect through the outer sect competition or breakthrough in cultivation every year. What about the other disciples? Where did they go? Some died because of a mistake in their cultivation. Some disciples died in fights. Some died during a mission. In short, every day of a year, 1 or 2 people in the outer sect would die. After many years, this unique scenery of the outer sect graveyard was finally created. Under the moonlight, tombstones were erected next to tombstones. Burials were stacked on top of each other, and a cold wind was blowing. Ghost flames were floating in the air, and from time to time, ghostly wails could be heard. The size of the graveyard did not look any smaller than the outer sect residential area, but the burial mound was still so crowded. Jiang Li carried the ghostwood tree with him. His footsteps were very heavy, and from time to time the crisp sounds of cracking could be heard. Every inch of the ground below was probably covered in bones. Don't blame me, Tilda, don't blame me, Tilda. With such a large number of burial grounds and such a long history, it was normal for the place to become haunted. Because this was a cultivation sect, any ghost or spirit that appeared would be easily dealt with. In the outside world, this place would definitely be a dangerous location for the living beings and the paradise of spirits and ghosts. After finding a slightly flat piece of ground, Jiang Li lightly snorted and directly smashed the ghostwood tree on his shoulder into the ground. Damn it, my internal force is almost depleted. After resting for a while, he recovered completely. Jiang Li hurriedly made preparations. He did not come here for a casual walk. He threw off his shoes and stood with his feet apart, burying his bare feet into the soil. The cold and slippery feeling made him feel somewhat comfortable. Under the moonlight, his shadow overlapped with the ghostwood tree. Jiang Li slowly opened his hands. From the shadow, it was as if 2 branches had grown out of that ghostwood tree. Standing there, Jiang Li closed his eyes and began to visualize and cultivate the ghostwood art in the gloomy graveyard. Ghostwood, ghost within the wood. Its roots drink the water of the netherworld. Its leaves cover the moon in the sky. This time, Jiang Li felt that his cultivation session was far different from before. He could clearly feel the icy cold Yinwood Qi energy within his reach, and it was still growing denser. That was for sure. Although the outer sect disciples were not of a high rank and were not strong, they were still cultivators. After a cultivator died, the yin qi and grievous aura produced by them would naturally surpass that of ordinary people. Over the past 200 years, more than 10,000 outer sect disciples had been buried in this graveyard. Therefore, even if it was not originally so, this graveyard had already been turned into a land of extreme yin. As for ghostwood trees, they were yin attribute in nature and could lure ghosts. In the secular world's tradition, such trees were not allowed to appear around the graveyard. However, this time, Jiang Li carried an old ghostwood tree that was over 69 years old and stood within the outer sect's graveyard. In an instant, a cold wind howled as dense yin qi began to gather in Jiang Li's direction. Ghost flames ignited in the air, and the number of wisps became more and more erratic. Over 100 green ghost flames surrounded Jiang Li and slowly drifted along with the yin qi vortex, also known as a penis. Chapter 18, Woodyin Infusion. Ordinary people would die on the spot if they stayed at this location with dense yin qi for more than 10 seconds. Jiang Li was an internal martial artist. He was strong and powerful, but he also felt a chill all over his body. As time passed, the chill traveled from his skin to his bones and back to his skin. If there was an outsider present, they would realize that Jiang Li's entire body was purple and his lips were black. He did not look like a living person at all. Attacked by Yin Qi added status, Woodyin Infusion. Woodyin Infusion. Lose 1 point of health per second, all attributes reduced by 30%, constitution reduced by 1.1. Duration, 12 hours minus plus. This was the first time that Jiang Li had seen a status that used seconds as a unit. Moreover, it was a negative state of depletion. Losing 1 health point every second. It was indeed impossible for a mortal body to withstand the yin qi produced in a graveyard of cultivators. However, Jiang Li did not immediately disperse his state, nor did he use his internal force to resist. Instead, he focused his mind and calmed his spirit. He used the method written in the ghostwood art to actively guide the yin qi into his body. Wasn't that why he had spent half a month cultivating behind closed doors? Although his current state was painful, drawing qi into his body was as easy as blowing off dust. The seed that he had been visualizing in his mind was taking shape at an unimaginable speed. It became clear, three-dimensional, and full of vitality. Ghostwood Art Qi Refinement Chapter Level, Right Arrow Level 1. Ghostwood Art Qi Refinement Chapter Level 1 has been reached. The new class, Qi Cultivator, has been acquired. Do you want to switch to the main class? On the interface, the level of the Ghostwood Art quietly changed. A striking notification popped up as well. Jiang Li decisively chose yes, and his main class was immediately replaced. Name Jiang Li. Age 13. Race human. Main class Qi Cultivator level, initial state. Subclass Martial Artist level, first rate. There was still a certain difference between the main and subclass. For example, in the original game settings, the experience gained from the main class would increase by 20%. However, in reality, it was unknown how this would occur. After cultivating the first level of the Ghostwood Art and becoming an initial stage Qi cultivator, Jiang Li immediately felt the difference. The bone-chilling numbness was fading bit by bit, and his stiff body was gradually recovering its senses. At this moment, not only did he no longer feel uncomfortable, he even felt as comfortable as a spring breeze. Looking at the interface again, the status of Woodyin Infusion was still there. However, things were different now. The dense Woodyin Qi was like a fatal poison to him earlier, but now it was a great supplement. Woodyin Infusion, the cultivation speed of Ghostwood Art will increase by 300%. Duration, 2 hours. Minus plus. This status had already moved from the negative status column to the positive status column. The effect was very good. He decisively pressed the plus button for 5 seconds. Woodyin infusion. The cultivation speed of ghost wood art will increase by 300%. Duration, infinity minus. Just this status was enough for his cultivation speed to be comparable to the best high-grade spiritual root. The speed was completely different from before. Jiang Li did not open his eyes and continued circulating his cultivation method while the iron was hot. Half an hour later, he went through an entire cycle of qi circulation in his body, and a stream of pure yin-wood spiritual qi flowed into the qi sea of his danshan. Only then did he leave his cultivation state, unable to hide his joy. The moment he opened his eyes, he was shocked. A ball of green ghost fire was floating close to his face. Jiang Li was terrified to the point of taking 2 steps back. Only now did he realize that there was not just a single ghost flame, and there were at least 100 of them. They were silently burning around him without any warmth, and it was an extremely strange scene. It was just like waking up with hundreds of burly men standing by your bed, smiling at you. I can't stay here for long. Having achieved his goal, Jiang Li picked up the ghostwood tree and decisively slipped away. This really depended on luck. The high mortality rate of the outer sect disciples in the scripture storage valley created this graveyard, which was rich in yin qi and had almost no ghosts. This place was simply a training ground tailored for him. With the addition of this ghostwood tree, it directly allowed his ghostwood art to successfully enter the initial stage. He even obtained a completely new status that could enhance his cultivation speed. Now that I've entered the initial stage qi refinement realm, I can use medicinal pills to aid my cultivation. In that case, my cultivation speed will be even faster. However, ordinary medium-grade spiritual roots disciples would need at least a month to enter the qi refinement realm after they started cultivating officially. My current speed is even faster than most people with high-grade spiritual roots. Looks like I have to come to this graveyard more often while keeping a low profile in the future. Otherwise, there's no reason to explain this exaggerated cultivation speed. Carrying the wood, Jiang Li's steps were as light as flying, much lighter than before. After becoming a cultivator, his body had also undergone some changes, especially the wood-yin spiritual qi. Just by having it entrenched in his qi sea, it gave him an endless amount of power, which was obviously much higher than the quality of his internal force. I have just entered the qi refinement realm, but am already comparable to the martial artists in the mortal world, or even surpass them. Cultivation and martial arts are indeed 2 different things. When I learn Dao techniques in the future, even connate martial artists will be easily killed by me. He hurriedly returned to his dormitory and placed the ghostwood tree in his courtyard. The night was too dark, so he did not notice that several new buds had sprouted on the old ghostwood tree. When he returned to his room, Jiang Li first took a glance at the clay pot by the window before gently pushing aside the soil. The seed beneath did not show any signs of sprouting. He was not in a hurry, and he did not pay any further attention to it after watering it once more. Sitting on the mat in the room, Jiang Li took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom. It was a qi-nourishing pill that could assist in cultivation. Consume the qi-nourishing pill. Added status, qi nourishment. Qi nourishment increases the vitality of the human body, increases the cultivation speed of qi refinement realm cultivation methods by 50%. Duration, 2 hours, minus plus. Jiang Li's hands did not stop moving. Qi-nourishing pills were stuffed into his mouth one after another. A warm current surged in his stomach, and the churning vitality rushed to his ears, causing his face to flush red. The pure spiritual qi that was originally locked in the medicinal pill slowly dissipated, and was absorbed by the ghost wood art that he was circulating at all times, continuously strengthening the strand of wood-yin spiritual qi in his qi sea. Jiang Li only stopped when his body began to feel bloated like a balloon that had been blown to its limit. Overdose of qi-nourishing pills. Added status, Accelerated Qi Nourishment. Accelerated Qi Nourishment increases the vitality of the human body, increases the cultivation speed of Qi refinement realm cultivation methods by 200%. Duration, 3 hours, minus plus. 5 seconds later. Accelerated Qi Nourishment increases the vitality of the human body, increases the cultivation speed of Qi refinement realm cultivation methods by 200%. Duration, infinity, minus. It was only at this moment that Jiang Li realized that cultivating was such a wonderful thing. Spiritual Qi continuously flowed into his Qi Si, and the Wood Yin spiritual Qi flourished. He could clearly sense that he was becoming stronger every moment. His cultivation speed was raised by 500%. Was this how it felt for top-grade spiritual root geniuses to cultivate? As expected, the web novels were right. This feeling was even better than the feeling of having sex. Cultivators often went into seclusion for a few years or decades, but it was actually not as boring as outsiders imagined. Unknowingly, time passed by quietly as he cultivated. The seed that Jiang Li visualized in his mind also cracked open slightly, and a sprout could be faintly seen from within. A week later, at the outer sect study hall. When the lecture elder walked into the main hall, his movements paused for a moment before a gratified expression appeared on his face. It seems like some of you have already achieved a breakthrough. Come show me who you are. The lecture elder picked up a name list and looked at everyone's seats. Xianxia, high-grade spiritual root. Not bad. This means that you've been working hard. Xianxia, who had always been sitting in the first row of the school, puffed up his chest proudly. After encouraging Xianxia, the elder looked at Jiang Li. Jiang Li, medium-grade spiritual root. The lecture elder frowned. Jiang Li, did you consume the pills in advance? The elder's voice was clearly dissatisfied. His first reaction when he heard that a medium-grade spiritual root disciple was able to break through to the Qi refinement realm at this time was from the use of pills. However, he had already mentioned in the first lesson of the outer sect that disciples with medium and high-grade spiritual roots were not allowed to consume medicinal pills before entering the Qi refinement realm. That would severely affect the potential of their later cultivation. The gains would not make up for the losses. Only disciples with low-grade spiritual roots and below, who did not have much potential to begin with, were allowed to consume medicinal pills as they could not even break through without taking them. Now that he felt that Jiang Li had violated his teachings, he was naturally very displeased. Elder, I did not take the pills beforehand. It is all thanks to your guidance that I was able to make a breakthrough at this time. Jiang Li did not start a verbal fight without a word. Instead, he praised the other party first. He had no interest in turning some small conflicts into a battle of reputation or a life-and-death battle. Oh, it has only been 20 days since you started cultivating. The other disciples with high-grade spiritual roots have yet to break through. Tell me, what kind of guidance did I give you to surpass the others so quickly? Of course, this elder still did not believe him. If Jiang Li had the backing of an immortal cultivator or had an elder behind him, then setting up a formation or something to help him cultivate would naturally be no problem. However, Jiang Li had a clean background and was an ordinary outer sect disciple. What could he do? Elder, you may not know this, but the cultivation method that this disciple practices is the ghost wood art. In the lecture last week, Elder said. Jiang Li calmly explained what he had done. He had only spoken halfway when the outer sect elder's brows completely relaxed. How could he not understand the situation at the outer sect's graveyard? There were at least dozens of ghosts that he had casually killed when he passed by. Ghostwood trees were yin attribute in nature, and this was common knowledge in the cultivation world. Ordinary ghostwood trees could only become spirits after 100 years, but if they were planted in the outer sect's graveyard, they would probably awaken after 10 years. It would be strange if Jiang Li's speed of cultivating the ghostwood art was not fast while staying there. Chapter 19. Choosing Another Manual. Not bad, not bad. I didn't expect you to be such a smart and courageous disciple. The lecture elder thought about it. If that was the case, this method really originated from his teachings. With just a few words, he was able to make a medium-grade spiritual root disciple surpass several high-grade spiritual root disciples. Which other lecture elder could be stronger than him in terms of teaching ability? As he thought about this, his gaze towards Jiang Li became even more gratified. Come, let me see your spiritual qi. Jiang Li did as he was told. He pulled out a wisp of spiritual qi from his qi si and released it from his palm. A misty streak of azure light rotated a few times in his palm before dissipating due to lack of control. The surrounding temperature plummeted, and Yan Hong, who was sitting beside him, could not help but shiver. When the lecture elder saw this scene, he was even more certain that relying on the qi-nourishing pills would not allow him to cultivate this kind of spiritual qi. Good, you have a very pure spiritual qi. In the future, the power of your spell techniques will be stronger than others. That troublesome graveyard is quite a good place for you. What you did was very correct. You didn't let me down. However, this method is far too risky. If you weren't an internal martial artist, you would have died by now. The lecture elder even gave him a casual lesson. Jiang Li also acted as if he had been taught a lesson, making the other party even more satisfied. Are you guys seeing this? Listen to my class, but don't just listen. You have to use the knowledge flexibly. Jiang Li is the best example. In the future, all of you must be more flexible in your thinking. Cultivation also requires thinking. After the elder took the opportunity to educate the other disciples, he once again looked towards Jiang Li and Xianxia with a gentle gaze. Xianxia and Jiang Li, since you've already broken through to the qi refinement realm, you don't have to come here anymore. Just go to the cultivation hall next door. All outer sect disciples who have reached the qi refinement realm will study there. The knowledge taught there is more profound and will be more helpful to you. You can even learn some simple spell techniques there for free. The study hall, they were currently in targeted disciples who had yet to enter the qi refinement realm. Most of them had just entered the sect this year, and a small number of them had yet to successfully draw qi into their bodies. The cultivation hall next door, on the other hand, targeted the qi refinement realm disciples. They would really teach them how to use spiritual qi and some harmless utility techniques. After all, there was a huge difference between having spiritual qi and not having it. It was just like how summer insects could not stand ice. How could they sit together in class? In the study hall, the purpose of the lecture elder was to let the disciples enter qi refinement as soon as possible. In the cultivation hall, the skill-imparting elders hoped that their disciples could master a skill as soon as possible. For example, planting spirit herbs, cultivating spirit fields, and excavating spirit mines. This was the only way they could enter production as soon as possible and contribute to the development of the sect. Jiang Li had already expected that the new class would be available. However, it was said that there would still be rewards if the new disciples performed well every year. As expected, the lecture elder continued. Every year among the new disciples, the top 10 disciples who break through to the qi refinement realm will be rewarded. Naturally, you will also be rewarded. Take these 2 talismans. The 2 of you can use them to go to the first level of the scripture storage pavilion after class and choose a spell technique. The lecture elder lightly stepped forward, and 2 pieces of yellow paper landed on the table in front of them. Thank you, elder. After the 2 of them thanked him, they put away the talisman paper under everyone's envious gazes. The hundreds of disciples present all had fervent eyes, secretly determined to double their efforts. But with their spiritual roots, what was the use of working 10 times harder? These rewards were prepared for the disciples with better talent and more resources. After class, the people in the circle surrounded and kept flattering them. Xianxia said, "Xianxia, Jiang Li, you guys have kept it a secret for so long. You guys broke through without telling us." The petite lady kept complaining, but it was not uncomfortable to hear at all. Qianfen also added, "Don't be too pleased with yourself, I can feel it. My breakthrough will happen in a few days. When the time comes, I definitely won't lose to you. Brother Jiang, do you have any tricks to teach us?" There. After a long while, the two of them finally finished dealing with everyone's goodwill and walked towards the inner sect area together. Leave the inner sect immediately after you have finished choosing the spell technique. You are not allowed to wander around or stay here. This time, when they passed through the inner sect passageway, there was no elder leading them. After they were stopped, they showed the talisman given by the elder and were allowed to pass. Tusk, stop putting on airs. Xianxia will become an inner sect disciple one day. What's there to be arrogant about? Xianxia was very unhappy with the disciple's attitude. Right, Jiang Li, you've given everyone a shock this time. What sort of technique do you intend to choose for this reward? Jiang Li realized that Xianxia's attitude towards him had changed. Previously, because of his medium-grade spiritual root, he was actually a sidelined character in their circle. But it was different now. Jiang Li could rely on the graveyard to cultivate. That place was not a one-time use place, and it would not vanish after being used. This meant that his cultivation speed would always be extremely fast in the future, and his status in everyone's hearts would naturally rise along with it. You're exaggerating too much. I just happened to be lucky enough to succeed. Didn't the elder say that if I wasn't an internal martial artist with powerful blood vitality, I would have died before I could draw qi into my body? Jiang Li did not point out their change in attitude. He only replied modestly, "I don't know what technique to take either. I guess I'll choose a wood attribute spell technique." As they chatted, they soon arrived at the scripture storage pavilion. After handing over the talisman paper, the metal door of scripture storage pavilion opened for them again. The spell technique area was the same as the cultivation method area. They were all labeled with attribute categories. Jiang Li naturally started searching for yin and wood spell techniques again. As expected, there were very few yin wood attribute spell techniques. These few books were a set with the coffin burial art in the cultivation method section. It was the legacy handed down by the corpse manipulation rogue cultivator clan. In terms of attributes, he should be able to use it as well. However, as expected of the corpse manipulators, these spells were all related to zombies, leaving Jiang Li helpless. Those who were related to zombies would often end up in pitiful situations like being lonely and crippled. Right. Those unlucky Taoists in the movies in his previous life, as well as the corpse manipulation clan that had once been wiped out, were the best proof. Jiang Li was a little repulsed by things that would harm his luck. However, it was too practical to give up. In the end, Jiang Li chose the most expensive spell technique from the available choices. Zombie Puppet Technique. Chapter 20, Mission Area. He glanced at Xianxia, who was still picking at the bookshelf. After all, there was some conflict between what to choose. If they took a profound technique, they might not be able to learn it in a short time since they had just entered the qi refinement realm. However, if they chose a spell that was too basic, then the value of this reward would be too low. They would be wasting this opportunity. Fortunately, Jiang Li was less troubled in this aspect. He touched the small pouch in his arms. There were 21 spirit stones lying quietly inside. The Qi Nourishing Pill cost 2 spirit stones per bottle, and the Qi Recovery Pill cost 1 spirit stone per bottle. He used the Qi Nourishing Pill and the Qi Recovery Pill to exchange for 6 spirit stones with Yan Hong. Adding on the 15 spirit stones he had only managed to gather 21 spirit stones. After he had made his breakthrough, Yan Hong had helped to ask around about the prices of spell techniques in the scripture storage pavilion. Some of the most basic spell techniques of the 5 elements even cost less than 10 spirit stones. Jiang Li saw that it was indeed the case. When he was selecting the zombie puppet technique earlier, he was aiming for the most expensive one. Now, on the other hand, the Yinwood attribute bookshelves were the exact opposite. He looked at the lowest price row. There was nothing he could do about it. He could not afford anything of a higher grade. Similarly, without much hesitation, Jiang Li selected a technique from both sides and walked to the counter to hand it to Elder Li. The scripture storage pavilion's Elder Li raised his eyes to glance at Jiang Li. 20 spirit stones. Jiang Li's funds immediately shriveled, leaving only a single spirit stone lying there. Elder Li casually put away the spirit stones. This small amount of spirit stones was simply too insignificant to him. He handed over 3 jade slips and placed them on the counter. Jiang Li was already in the qi refinement realm and could already use his spiritual qi to activate the jade slip. He sat down on the mat next to him and placed the 3 jade slips on his forehead one after another. He slowly inserted his spiritual qi into the jade slips according to the techniques he had learned in class. A large amount of information about the spell techniques flowed into his mind like liquid. After using 3 jade slips in a row, he still felt a little dizzy, but he no longer felt dizzy for the first time. After he handed the jade slip back, Xianxia finally chose his spell technique. Bye. With tacit understanding, they did not exchange information about any of the techniques they had chosen. After leaving the inner sect area, they parted amicably. Jiang Li did not return to the dormitory to continue cultivating, nor did he rush to try out the cultivation method. Instead, he arrived at the function area of the outer sect. The function area was the area where the outer sect disciples had the most daily activities, such as the trading area and mission area. Jiang Li first walked into the trading area. The trading area was huge, but the planning inside was very messy. Other than the rows of shops with shop fronts, there were also many disciples who laid a piece of cloth on the ground and sat down by the side of the road, setting up stalls like the night market in his previous life. This caused the outer sect trading area to become even more bustling and chaotic. The prices of the goods were lower than those in the shops. This attracted many disciples who were short of money. From time to time, disciples would come forward and haggle. Sometimes Jiang Li would be one of them, but most of the time he would wander aimlessly in the trading area. Of course, he was not bored. With every step he took, his level 3 appraisal skill would be thrown around crazily. In fact, the majority of the items on the ground here were ordinary miscellaneous items. The weapons used by mortal warriors, such as sabers, spears, staffs, and so on, were at most of better quality. There were also some animal fur, bones, internal organs, and other biological materials. Most of them were obtained by the outer sect disciples when they went out on missions. Medicinal pills, artifacts, incomplete manuals, and other cultivator items could be seen here. However, the quantity was quite low. Furthermore, nearly half of them were either broken or fake. No one was a fool. Things that were slightly better and had value were kept and used by themselves. It was very rare to see them sold here. However, the security in the outer sect trading area was pretty good. All the disciples placed their items on the ground, but nobody tried to steal or snatch anything. After all, the existence of the law enforcement hall was a great deterrent to them. Yan Hong, how's business today? Jiang Li walked to the depths and saw his chubby friend. Yan Hong also took up an ordinary stall in the trading area. He was very careful in doing some business. There were not many things on his cloth. A few basic medicinal pills and a few basic spiritual materials were goods that were commonly sold on the streets. Jiang Li had seen them at least 20 times along the way, and there were even fewer people who went up to ask for the price. Haha, Jiang Li, it's you. I've gained quite a bit today. I plan to wait a bit longer and officially open my shop next month. Yan Hong waved a booklet in his hand. It was filled with names and numbers. Of course, he was not talking about gains as in spirit stones, but these numbers instead. Yan Hong had been in this market for more than 10 days. From the moment he figured out the rules, he casually set up a stall and sat there. As for their 19 lackeys, they were also called over. Every day, they would go around the entire trading area asking about the price and haggling. Finally, They would gather at Yan Hong's place for him to register and tabulate. He was new here and did not know how to start doing business. You really are meant to do business. In that case, their monthly allowance next month will be used as the starting capital. Don't give it to me for the time being. However, don't forget about your own qi refinement cultivation. Yan Hong's enthusiasm for becoming a businessman did not diminish after he came to the sect. Instead, he became even more determined. Jiang Li naturally expressed his support towards this. After all, if he had a merchant friend supporting him, regardless of whether it was purchasing resources or selling items, it would be very helpful. I know, I have a high-grade spiritual root, don't worry. By the way, didn't you guys go to pick a spell technique today? How was your selection? Do you have any special resources that you need? I can keep an eye out for you. Suddenly, Yan Hong thought of this. After a moment of pondering, Jiang Li organized the information about the spell techniques in his mind and discovered that there was indeed something he needed. Are there any zombies for sale in this outer sect trading area? What's the exact price? Yan Hong was stunned. He scratched his head and looked pensive. After recalling for a moment, he dabbed some saliva on his finger and quickly flipped through the book. There are zombies, but they are too big and not convenient to carry. The demand for them in our scripture storage valley is small, so it's very rare for outer sect disciples to capture them. So in the outer sect, only 2 shops have zombies for sale, and the quality is very low while the price is very high. In short, it's not worth it. All right, then you should help me keep an eye out. I also want methods to capture zombies or refine them. Also, help me keep a lookout for seeds of some spiritual trees and spiritual materials. There's no rush. If the price is suitable, I can buy some. Jiang Li stated his request. Yan Hong nodded and wrote down these 2 points. See you then. I have to go to the mission area again to see if there are any missions that can be taken at the initial stage of the qi refinement realm. Jiang Li used his appraisal for 2 hours as usual before walking towards the mission area. This appraisal skill came with the system, but as usual, the speed of leveling up was simply too slow. He could only take time out every day to speed up the progress, but he could not force it. However, his understanding over the past few days made him deeply understand his poverty. The monthly allowance given by the sect was far from enough. He needed to think of a way to earn more spirit stones. However, he did not know how to refine pills or weapons. As a novice who did not have a skill to utilize, he could only go to the mission area to see if there were any missions suitable for him. After all, in the scripture storage valley, outer sect disciples had to do missions after a year. Some disciples had not even drawn qi into their bodies at that time. If even they could receive missions in the mission area, why couldn't Jiang Li, an initial stage qi refinement cultivator, do the same? The outer sect mission area was a very large indoor hall. There were also a lot of disciples here. They were talking in groups of 3 or 5. Most of them were gathered in front of the 3 large tokens to check out the missions they could accept. Here, Jiang Li could clearly sense an aura that was different from the trading area. The expressions of the disciples here were obviously more urgent than the disciples in the trading area. Some disciples that had been here all year round even had icy expressions, as if they saw everyone as enemies who had killed their fathers. From time to time, a few older outer sect disciples would return to hand in their missions. Some of them were covered in blood, while others directly carried some unknown monster, appearing rather fierce. Jiang Li understood a bit. Even though the mission area did not have any requirements for accepting missions, it was still very considerate to have divided the missions into 3 difficulty levels, and the missions one was suggested to take were classified as much. Initial stage qi refinement, mid-stage qi refinement, and late-stage qi refinement. Although these 3 stages were all in the qi refinement realm, the gap between them could often be several times, or even 10 times. Jiang Li estimated his own strength. He had only started cultivating for a few days and had yet to master any spell techniques. The single subclass of an internal martial artist would at most allow his body to be slightly stronger than the average cultivator at the initial stage Qi refinement realm. He did not seem to have much of an advantage here. On the other hand, he was quite confident in his recovery ability. As he thought about it, he realized that he was actually quite ordinary. Then, he walked to the mission board of the initial stage Qi refinement realm. Disciple to fan the flames. The disciple will go to the alchemy hall to fan the flames for the pill furnace. Each person must work for 2 hours. Requirements: fire or wood attribute spiritual roots. Reward: 5 Qi recovery pills per person per day and 1 spirit stone. Collecting ghost needle grass. Head to the herbal hall to gather spiritual materials for the ghost needle herb garden. Each person must pluck 300 grams of needle leaves. Requirements: none. Reward: 1 healing pill per person per day and 1 spirit stone. Cleaning the sect. The disciple will head to the outer sect residential area to clean up the environment. Each person must clean up 20% of the area. Requirements: none. Reward: each person gets 1 spirit stone every 7 days. Pill testing disciple. Disciple will head to the alchemy hall to test out the effects of a pill. Disciple's safety is ensured. Requirements: physically strong and healthy. Reward: 3 spirit stones per person per test.